Watch. He's 82, Army veteran, 60 years in the woods. He had a backpack marked with initials, a left-handed rifle, a map dotted with pencil marks, a compass, Midland radio, and a thermos of coffee. Everything checked, everything working. He took his seat at North Point, stone ledge, juniper thickets, a hush that made it seem the forest itself was holding its breath. The last signal, 7:20. 40 minutes later, the place is empty. No tracks, no response on the radio, no shell casing, no fabric, no sound. On the moss, one print, standing, still, and a strange impulse on the radio channel at 9:43. One pulse, and then nothing. What would you feel if days after the disappearance, on the radio recording you heard a voice that couldn't be there? Or if on the tape filmed before the hunt, in the final frame you saw a figure that wasn't in the woods? And the most important part, he wasn't a ghost, for heaven's sake. So, where did he go if the forest was swept line by line? Sunday, November 19th, 2015. Brant Lake, Warren County, New York. Temperature hovering near zero, cold but not harsh, typical late fall in the Adirondack Mountains. The leaves had all but dropped, tree trunks sketching out the wood's geometry, hunters calling it shooting lines. This was the day they picked, dry, clear, a little windy, bearable. At 6:43 a.m., 6 men reached the lake's west side, crossed the stony clearing, and split up according to a well-rehearsed plan, hunting deer. The group, Joe Messick, son, Vince Muchante, Robert Thomas, Tom Messick, Fred Lascom, and James Sharp, all past 60. National Guard veterans, longtime friends, these hunts were a tradition. Tom Messick, the eldest at 82, never lagged, thanks to a stubborn streak and old Army discipline. Partial vision loss in his right eye never slowed him down. He was the team's sound detector. Tom could distinguish animal noise from a snap of a human's boot. The plan was simple: 3 men setting along the firing line on the hillside, the other 3 moving through the woods, pushing game east to west, herding it toward the line. This wasn't random. Deer crossed the ridge, heading down for water at the lake. Tom, Fred, and James took up positions on the line, each about 150 feet apart, silent, still, eyes locked ahead. The line tracked a stream, with soft moss underfoot and a clear shot through a break in the pines. Their maps, old paper marked Sector 6B in their own code, were full of annual notes, routes, landmarks, rocks, snags, old traps. This year, Tom was dropped at his spot last. He walked in with Joe, stopped 30 yards short, declared, "This is good." Joe moved on. By their system, no one was to double back into Tom's area. From that moment, everyone worked their post. Radios on, coordinates agreed. Last contact with Tom between 7 and 7:20. He radioed in, said he was settled, all clear. 20 minutes after the party began advancing through the woods, Vince, Joe, and Robert crept in from the east, moving slow, sweeping the brush, eyes lifted, just like training. Tom wasn't new to the woods, 82, yet he logged more time here than at home. Respected, quiet, but always listening. He was like an antenna, Vince recalled. Didn't say much, but he heard everything. That was Tom. No hustle, no panic. He felt the woods. No one expected that day to have to explain to police how one of their own vanished in a place where everyone was in each other's sight, where no one else was expected, and, according to later reports, it was logically impossible to leave the sector unnoticed. Sunday, November 19th, 2015. Brant Lake, Warren County, New York. Temperature hovering near zero, cold but not harsh, typical late fall in the Adirondack Mountains. The leaves had all but dropped, tree trunks sketching out the wood's geometry, hunters calling it shooting lines. This was the day they picked, dry, clear, a little windy, bearable. At 6:43 a.m., 6 men reached the lake's west side, crossed the stony clearing, and split up according to a well-rehearsed plan, hunting deer. The group: Joe Messick, son; Vince Musciante, Robert Thomas, Tom Messick, Fred Lascom, and James Sharp. All past 60. National Guard veterans, longtime friends, these hunts were a tradition. Tom Messick, the eldest at 82, never lagged, thanks to a stubborn streak and old Army discipline. Partial vision loss in his right eye never slowed him down. He was the team's sound detector. Tom could distinguish animal noise from a snap of a human's boot. The plan was simple: 3 men setting along the firing line on the hillside, the other 3 moving through the woods, pushing game east to west, herding it toward the line. This wasn't random. Deer crossed the ridge, heading down for water at the lake. Tom, Fred, and James took up positions on the line, each about 150 feet apart. Silent, still, eyes locked ahead. The line tracked a stream with soft moss underfoot and a clear shot through a break in the pines. Their maps, old paper marked Sector 6B in their own code, were full of annual notes: routes, landmarks, rocks, snags, old traps. This year, Tom was dropped at his spot last. He walked in with Joe, stopped 30 yards short, declared, "This is good." Joe moved on. By their system, no one was to double back into Tom's area. From that moment, everyone worked their post. Radios on, coordinates agreed. Last contact with Tom, between 7 and 7:20. He radioed in, said he was settled, all clear. 20 minutes after the party began advancing through the woods, Vince, Joe, and Robert crept in from the east, moving slow, sweeping the brush, eyes lifted, just like training. Tom wasn't new to the woods. 82, yet he logged more time here than at home, respected, quiet, but always listening. He was like an antenna, Vince recalled, didn't say much, but he heard everything. That was Tom. No hustle, no panic. He felt the woods. No one expected that day to have to explain to police how one of their own vanished in a place where everyone was in each other's sight, where no one else was expected, and, according to later reports, it was logically impossible to leave the sector unnoticed. The spot where Tom Messick settled on the morning he disappeared was known within the hunting group as North Point. It was a patch at the edge of the slopes where a high rocky ledge cut through the forest like a natural wall. The steep drop changed the terrain. Trees grew dense, juniper thickets appeared, the ground soft with a bed of fallen pine needles. On a clear day, especially in November when the leaves had fallen, visibility stretched 30 to 40 meters ahead. These were the kinds of places Tom preferred. He always said the quieter the woods, the more you could hear. When Joe Messick, his son, dropped him off at the mark, they confirmed coordinates briefly, then parted. Tom carried a Midland radio, simple, reliable, fixed frequency. The check-in went smoothly. The next in line, Fred Lascom, was set just 35 yards away diagonally. Thick brush blocked sight, but both were within shouting or gunshot distance. The first half hour passed quietly. Joe, to the east, began moving along the slope as planned, followed closely by Vince and Robert. Experienced hunters, these routes were well practiced. Tom was to hold station no more than an hour and a half. After the drive was done, they would meet at a forest road clearing called Pine Cut. Around 8:45, Fred radioed, "My spot's stable, no movement." Tom didn't respond. No alarm sounded. Radios often lost signal in that terrain, especially if batteries were aging. Vince pushed on without hearing anything unusual. The first oddity came at 9:20. Joe, after finishing his route, reached the rendezvous point and waited for his father. Then he started calling out on the radio. No reply. He returned to Tom's drop-off point. He was gone. No trace, no broken branch, no hint of movement, just a single patch in the soft ground. It seemed someone had been standing there. Joe circled the area. Silence. No fabric snags, no scent, no disturbed leaves. It was as if the man simply stopped existing. Later, at questioning, Fred said, "I didn't hear a rustle or footsteps. It was like like he vanished. The woods were calm, no wind. Everyone thought Tom had just stepped aside, maybe spotted game and went to check. But by 10 a.m., he was nowhere to be found. This marks what official reports call the initial disappearance phase, and what many hunters refer to as the strange zone. There was another detail later. 2 years prior, at the same spot, a hunter suffered an odd injury. He'd fallen, though the ground was level. He claimed disorientation, despite walking a familiar trail. This was logged as fatigue syndrome. Now, those same coordinates mark a man vanished again, within direct gunshot range, within hearing distance, in broad daylight, without a sound, signal, or trace. None of the hunters heard a shot, scream, fall, or even a snap. Nothing. By 11 a.m., the hunt was officially called off. Joe Messick, discovering his father missing at the drop point, combed the sector repeatedly, cross-checking with map and compass. He started rallying the others. In the next 40 minutes, the whole group gathered at the meeting point, Pine Cut. The first suggestion, maybe he went back to the truck. But when Fred arrived 40 minutes later, Tom was nowhere in sight. Impromptu search began. Joe and Vince took the northern section, Fred and Robert the south. Vince, armed with the map, attempted to plot a route Tom might have taken if he'd decided to move. They shouted his name, knocked on trees, even kept radios on continuous broadcast. No reply. By lunchtime, it was clear. Tom couldn't have just walked off. He wasn't the type to roam. He had a compass, map, thermos, fully charged radio. The only explanation, he either fell and couldn't call out, or something happened that broke the logical chain. This was the first time someone in the group said what later made it to official reports. The situation defies explanation. At 2 p.m., they split into pairs for a second sweep. They hoped maybe he'd decided to follow the forest road to the truck, but kept going. Yet the group knew Tom would have left marks. He never moved without visual guides, always carving bark, stacking stones at turns. Now, no signs. By 4 p.m., as dusk fell, the group decided to call for backup. Exactly 8 hours after Tom disappeared, the first missing person report went out in Warren County near Brant Lake. Police arrived close to 7 p.m., 2 local officers and a Forest Service agent. They briefed, interviewed, mapped the routes, then postponed active search until morning. The reason, lack of gear and fading daylight. Reports noted, according to witnesses, the missing's behavior ruled out accidental disorientation. Still, Joe and Vince stayed overnight near the last known location. They built a fire, patrolled sectors, left radios on, and lit perimeter lamps. No sign. Silence. No footprints. No torn branches or broken grass trails that usually mark a fall or movement through brush. Morning saw a major operation begin. K-9 units, quad patrols, SAR teams, helicopter. Search areas were charted. Blind ridges mapped. Spots helicopters might miss bodies. Then, protocol broke. One team reported GPS signal loss at the spot Tom should have been. For almost 3 minutes, signal froze despite clear skies and direct satellite line. First blamed on old gear, then a second GPS from a different brand caught the same blackout. Drone data later added no clue. The same day, a helicopter pilot said he spotted no heat signatures from fires ground teams insisted were burning. The report called it temporary data desynchronization. No further explanation was offered. On the 4th day after the disappearance, a volunteer group combing the western part of the sector found something later logged as the only possible trace, a patch of soft moss with a footprint dent, roughly a size 10, not deep, not stretched, as if someone stood still rather than walked. But crucially, the print didn't continue. Around it, nothing. No tracks, no broken bark, no crushed grass. A clean patch, as if the figure stood and simply vanished. At first, the trail was ignored, but coordinates later matched nearly exactly with Tom Messick's last known position. That dent became almost sacred, the only link left of a man no one saw or heard, who couldn't have left unnoticed. That same day, local ranger Jim Hallworth wrote in an internal note, "The forest felt closed in. No sound, no birds, no crackles, no water. I don't remember hearing my own footsteps." That note wasn't in official files, but surfaced later in archived copies. Some searchers quietly said to each other, "This isn't right. Something's wrong." But such thoughts stayed silent. Official reports exclude that language. After 8 days of no luck, operation coordinators made the call: pull back the perimeter and start fresh. That meant returning to the very first drop, North Point, where Tom was last placed. In the coming days, fresh tracks appeared: boots, quads, dogs, but the scene blurred. Still, tracking specialists rethought the route through Tom's logic. The ground was clean and dry. No clue. Normally, a man in panic or lost breaks his path, hesitates, leaves signs, or drops something. Here, it was like he never started moving, as if he stood, waited, then vanished. One volunteer, an old hunter, called the spot a trap, not physically, but energetically. He said, "If I were here, I wouldn't move either. Something's pressing down." Joe Messick's route map yielded no leads, all points covered. Tom couldn't have gone far, not with his health, his vision, and certainly not without anyone hearing steps. On the 10th day, Search Coordinator Officer Steve Polero proposed a theory known as three-point disorientation, a rare phenomenon where a person gets caught in a looped forest section marked by repeating landmarks. 3 identical turns, 3 similar trees, 3 exits from the same slope. Such woods can visually close in around you, especially if the person is old, has limited mobility, and isn't using GPS. But the theory had one weak spot. If Tom had gotten caught in such a trap, he would have shouted, fired a shot, sat down, or left some sign like he used to do. Most importantly, he knew the route. They'd hunted this area for years. All landmarks were familiar. This wasn't new forest. It was the same zone where they'd hunted deer every fall for 3 seasons running. In a radio session recording, automatically captured at a Lake George station, a strange impulse was recorded, a brief signal on Tom's radio frequency at 9:43 a.m. on the day he vanished. No signal before or after. So brief it was dismissed as interference, but Joe, upon hearing, said, if that was his radio, he tried to call out. Maybe he had seconds left. Equipment checks after the active search showed a strange glitch. Tom's Midland LX-T600 radio was registered as functional. Issued to him a week before the incident, its battery should have lasted 36 hours in passive mode. But a forestry engineer dismantling a similar model found that certain 2014-2015 units could freeze in transmit mode, sending no sound, receiving nothing. They called it open channel error. If that happened as Tom tried to send coordinates, his channel might have been blocked, and the message never reached the team. Here comes the catch. No signal was ever confirmed on the ground. Even if the radio froze, it should have been found. Not the case, clip, earphone, or battery. Everything vanished with him. And here, for the first time, the rescuers debated a question no one wanted to voice. What if he didn't fall? What if he was never there from the start? By the 3rd week of fruitless searching, rumors started to spread through Horicon and nearby areas. At first, the talk was typical. Tom might have simply chosen to leave this life. But those close to him dismissed that instantly. No history of depression, plans lined up in November, and above all, he would never do that to his own son. Then came whispers of something in the woods. At first, a hint at a wildcat, lynx appeared rarely in those parts. Then, two strange sounds a young volunteer claimed to hear, high-pitched squeals, almost at the threshold of hearing. But woodlands hold many acoustic quirks, so it was chalked up to noise or fear. Still, the wave didn't fade. Local rangers began to carefully avoid the sector north of Brant Lake. Some spoke of heavy air, others of the forest's odd silence. Several Skidmore College students who joined the search later blogged, "This place seems to swallow sound." The post vanished within a day. Anonymous calls started coming to Joe Messick's house, silent on the other end. He didn't pay much mind until one landed precisely at 9:43 a.m., the exact minute the last radio signal was recorded from his father. The phone had no number logged. It was a landline. A callback went unanswered. Only silence. On the 22nd day after the disappearance, the county planned a press briefing, ending active search, giving a brief summary, and presenting a theory: disorientation leading to probable death. The room was prepped, journalists credentialed, cameras set in the hall. But an hour and a half before start, it was abruptly canceled. No explanation. Later, it emerged the choice followed a sudden visit by an unknown DEC official from Albany. The man held a closed-door meeting with operation coordinators. One participant recalled a single question: what was at that spot in 1971? No one had an answer. No official connection to that year existed. The detail leaked later. An old case. In 1971, 12 miles north, a 52-year-old man went missing. His body never found. The case closed as a drowning. Coincidence? Maybe. But after the briefing cancellation, many felt truth was being pushed further away. Among searchers, the mood shifted. One wrote in private notes, "I feel like the truth is slipping away from us." A month after the disappearance, Joe sifted through old footage his father had shot on a mini DV camera, the last tape from last year's hunt. But his interest was grabbed by a tape labeled B-Drive 05, which, by timeline, should have held the morning's trip recording. The camera was found in their truck, inside on the back seat, battery fully charged. The tape wasn't rewound. He loaded it into an old Sony player and hit play. The recording ran as usual: morning, road, hushed talks. Tom holding a map, pointing out the route. Then a stop by the lake. The camera sat on the dash. The men exit, take up arms, and head into the woods. Then, near the end, Joe spots something through the back window at the very edge of the frame. A blurry silhouette, just a fraction of a second. Not one of the group. They'd all already stepped out. Not the cameraman either. He sat up front. The figure stood motionless, shape ambiguous, maybe wearing a hood. Then the camera cut to black, as if it stopped. Joe rewound. The frame was gone. On the spot, only glare. He watched that tape 8 times. The moment appeared once. Tape glitch? Or something recorded? He never told police. About 6 months after the active search ended, an anonymous letter came to the Glens Falls Library. Inside, a copy of the state's hunting zone visitor log from 1971. It marked Sector 7B, forest west of Brant Lake. The column Access to Zone listed 3 names, one of them, T. Messick. The problem? In 1971, Tom was stationed as an instructor in Georgia and, family says, never traveled north. His signature at the bottom didn't match known samples, but looked visually close. The paper seemed authentic, yellowed, stamped archival date. On the back, a pencil note. No return recorded. Police were skeptical. They had no reason to tie it to the case, but within private circles following the disappearance, the record caused a stir. Some said it was a mistake. Others believed Messick visited the area long before and maybe hid it even from his family. Joe later said in an interview, "My father had years he never talked about. I knew he served, but those details seemed cut out. Maybe the sheet was forged. Maybe not. But it became the first item pointing not to the day of the disappearance, but 44 years earlier. When private researchers began building a heat map of all leads and anomalies, one oddity emerged. Nearly every anomaly, signal loss, radio glitch, muffled sounds, strange human behavior, clustered within the same square, a patch about 300 meters along the forest's northern edge. Later dubbed the Silent Zone, radios dropped out there, GPS devices faltered, and sound activity was notably low. Biologists theorized it might be caused by geomagnetic traps or mineral deposits underground. The area was never officially mapped. But several teams, including geophysics experts from SUNY Albany, confirmed the electromagnetic noise was unstable. Signals seemed to fade at certain times. Tom Messick was dropped 50 meters from this zone. He could have entered, even lingered. But how to explain the total absence of any trace, not just a body, but all his gear? His rifle, watch, flask, none found. Vince Coughlin, a volunteer from the first 3 search days, visited Joe 8 months later. He came unannounced, asking their talk remain off record. He said he'd held back in interviews, otherwise they'd write me off as crazy. On day 1, patrolling the southwest slope, he spotted a reflection, a brief flash, like from glass or metal. He moved toward it, but found nothing. Suddenly, his hearing vanished, completely, for about 30 seconds. No bird calls, no breath. The forest felt switched off. When sound returned, a wave of unease hit that he couldn't explain. His GPS clock glitched. He thought he was tired. But later, at home, he realized his Casio W59 wristwatch was exactly 43 minutes slow. He replaced the battery, bought new watches. But that model never worked right. He left the watch with Joe, saying, "If you want, check it out, but I'm done with this forest." By early the next year, the local Post-Star paper received a call from a man named Paul Bruno. He claimed that back in 1976, when he was 19, he was part of a youth summer camp in the very area north of Brant Lake. The day before departure, one friend, Ted Harris, left with a compass and never returned. The search lasted 4 days, with no success. Police thought he had run off, but Paul said Ted's compass was later found within 100 meters of camp, and the duty log recorded a strange note. Sound like a discharge heard deep in the woods. When asked why he kept silent for years, Paul said, "When I heard about Tom's case, I recognized that place. Exact same. I knew it wasn't coincidence." No official record of Ted's case exists. But the disappearance 39 years before Messick's at the same coordinates marked another point on the unofficial map of anomalous coincidences. On day 43, after Tom disappeared, a Vermont volunteer with a dog named Gray hit the southeast line of the sector. Gray suddenly alerted and darted to an old clearing, signaling an intense find, like when dogs pick up an old human trail. The next 2 hours spent sweeping with thermal imagers and metal detectors. A faded fabric strip, typical for marking hunting routes, was found just meters from Gray's path. One side, bright blue, matching Tom's marker. The team cheered until they noticed fresh knife cuts on a nearby branch, not older than weeks. No other traces, no scent, no trash, no disturbed soil. Just the tape, and a dog that later was proven to give false positives in 3 other cases that year. The trail led nowhere. But unease grew. Who left the tape? It looked planted. And why, if no one officially worked in that sector anymore? In spring 2016, Joe Messick received a CD in the mail. It held a recording of radio chatter from the Search and Rescue channel used in November 15. No explanation accompanied it, no letter, no indication of who made the copy. The tape ran almost 5 hours, synced with search logs. At hour 3, around 1:26 p.m., a male voice spoke, unmatched with any call signs of team members. Clear, calm. "I'm still here. Let me know if you're moving." Then silence. No one on the team owned that voice. Equipment checks found no fault. The Kenwood radio's volunteers used didn't have access to open civilian channels without manual tuning. Police listened, but saw no grounds to open a case. It could be interference from other frequencies. Joe didn't push. Later, a noise specialist told him, "That's no interference. Someone's talking. And not from your group." 92 days after the disappearance, a secondary check of the gear revealed a glitch. One emergency beacon repeater, set by volunteers in Sector 7B, briefly sent a false alarm. The control room didn't register it, but system logs marked it as a one-time spontaneous response at 146.520 MHz, the standard emergency frequency. This repeater sat 30 meters from where an old bottle marked Shroon Lake Gun Club, Tom's former club, was found. The bottle was empty, old, fingerprint-free, but bore S15 etched on its bottom, matching the search sector. Albany experts thought the repeater caught interference or a bounced signal. The manufacturer, a Wisconsin firm, said such glitches happen only near powerful electromagnetic fields or deliberate near-range activation. The scenario seemed unlikely. If someone was nearby, why was no one seen? Tom owned a personal Remington 870 shotgun, modified for a left-handed shooter. His family confirmed he never went hunting without it. More importantly, the gun was registered, its serial number logged in the database. That meant that even a single found part, bolt, stock, shell casing, could lead police to identify it. But no fragments were ever found. That was troubling because similar missing hunters almost always left behind at least one metal piece. The gun, a flask, a knife. A seasoned veteran with 60 years in the field wouldn't just leave his rifle behind and walk off. Even if he lost his way, he'd fire a shot into the air, signal for help. But no shot, no shell casings. This broke the expected behavior pattern of a trained man. The question arose, what if the gun wasn't lost, but taken? By whom? And how? Comparing all the found clues, the bottle, tape, log, beacon glitch, showed nearly all pointed to one coordinate, a crossroads of an old logging trail and a long, dry creek. This spot hadn't stood out at first, but now looked like an unseen center of gravity. Researcher Rick Garrett said a volunteer who'd visited repeatedly claimed, "It's always quiet there, not like in other parts of the woods. No birds, no mosquitoes, no water sounds, like stepping inside a glass dome." They scanned the area again with LiDAR, no underground structures. But the laser revealed a glitch in one square, like something in the terrain reflected the signal to nowhere. They chalked it up to tech error. But the coincidence left an impression. Everything pulled toward that point, like something was there, or taken from there. In February 2017, a year and a half after Tom's disappearance, police in Hamilton County received a letter from a man in Pennsylvania. His name was James Sharp, 56 years old, who claimed that in 1983, in the same forest, something similar happened to him. He was fishing with his father and brother near Long Pond Creek. At one point, he stepped ahead to photograph a duck on the water. Minutes later, he said, everything fell silent, so much that he could hear his own breathing. Then he looked back. The forest seemed different. Everything turned gray, like through a filter. He returned to the trail after about 20 minutes, but his family said he'd been gone for 4 hours. He didn't believe it until he saw the clock. James never spoke publicly about this. But when he heard about Messick's disappearance, especially the glass silence in a certain zone, he felt compelled to share. He didn't mention portals or aliens. He simply said, there are places in the woods where something's wrong with time and sound. No science explains this. Yet in the unofficial Potential Patterns database, Messick became the 15th case indicating altered time and sound perception. 2 years after the disappearance, the case officially closed. The county sheriff labeled it a tragic disappearance of an elderly man with declining health. He noted the lack of traces was due to weather, timing, and possible fall into inaccessible terrain. Behind the scenes, those who worked the case didn't buy it. No signs of falling, screaming, panic, no animals, machines, or trackers, nothing. Messick's family rejected the accident theory. Joe kept pointing out strange details, beacon malfunctions, a bottle, radio signals, coordinate coincidences. When independent researcher Martin Crowe compared Ted Harris's possible disappearance in summer 1976 with Tom Messick's fall 2015, both points overlapped within 6 meters. More precisely, they matched the last known locations, Paul Bruno's story in the first case, and the Messick Group's GPS logs in the second. Crowe tried to find others missing within a 1-mile radius over 40 years. He found 3 brief mentions, 1 fisherman, a female mushroom hunter, a teen cyclist. None made headlines since all were found, but most recalled the same feeling. Not the right place. Loss of sound, distorted perception, disorientation, lasting minutes or hours. Crowe made no conclusions but centered his theory on one spot, a crossing of an old logging trail and a creek bed near Sector S-15. He wrote in a note, "If someone wanted to hide the place where reality fades, they wouldn't cover it up. They'd just put a forest there." In spring 2018, 3 young enthusiasts from an Anomalies in Forests channel, Jason, Mark, and Leslie, decided to visit Tom Messick's case coordinates. They loaded all points from the pattern map into their GPS and reached the northern zone, largely unexplored due to a ravine. Leslie said she felt a strange pressure in her ears near the creek. Mark reported a brief nausea spell. Jason's camera glitched. He was sure he'd filmed, but the video didn't save. They left after 15 minutes. Later in editing, Jason noticed a blink in drone footage. Just for a split second, a blur in the leaves, like something moved. No people or animals were nearby at the time. To this day, Tom Messick's body remains missing. His case isn't listed in federal cold case files. Joe Messick holds boxes of maps, reports, audio, and message copies. He avoids new interviews, but says he remembers the voice, the one on the tape, the one that said, "I'm still here." Put it all together, a seasoned hunter vanished with his team. No sound, no signal, no trace, no scent, no gunfire, no clothes, just glitches, just invisible points. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe he fell into a crevice. Maybe a bear dragged him off. Maybe it's just coincidences. Or maybe we simply don't understand how some parts of the forest work. I'm not saying there are portals in the New York woods. I'm not saying Tom Messick's case is paranormal. But I do know this. There's no body, no explanation, no effort to understand what went wrong. Clues scattered, signals glitching, witnesses forgotten, and the coordinates, they overlap. Too often to ignore. If you know similar stories, share in the comments. If it happened to your father, would you believe in an accident? And, once again, thanks to everyone watching my videos.